Unless you've been living under a rock, you've probably seen the buzz surrounding the 97th Academy Awards, where Anora, the scrappy indie darling, swept several major categories.
Anora, Sean Baker.
Anora, Sean Baker!
Anora.
Despite its largely positive reception, the film quickly faced a wave of backlash online, with many arguing that it was over-rewarded, in particular Mikey Madison's win for Best Actress.
Mikey Madison.
And so while the internet continues debating whether or not Demi Moore was robbed for the substance, my growing focus throughout 2024 and 2025 was how Anora as a film was received, both by critics and general audiences, and how I wish the same level of attention had been paid to one of Sean Baker's earlier films a decade ago from 2015, titled Tangerine. Premiering at the Cannes Film Festival, Anora became an early critical hit, and despite speculation that The Brutalist, Conclave, or even Wicked could potentially upset for Best Picture, Anora ultimately carried its hype from Cannes all the way through award season to the Oscars. But why Anora? Director Sean Baker is a veteran indie filmmaker known for telling stories about people on the fringes of society, often centering on marginalized groups such as the trans community in Tangerine, or sex workers as in Anora. His distinct style and humanistic approach have made films beloved among cinephiles like The Florida Project and Red Rocket. Anora is the film that finally catapulted him to mainstream recognition and worldwide acclaim. Although I would argue that Anora's surprising sweeping success was paved by Tangerine's boldness and ingenuity. And I sort of feel bittersweet about the whole thing. Like many people on YouTube and Letterboxd, I have been a longtime fan of Sean Baker's films, so seeing him become the first person in history to win 4 Oscars in the same night for one film was insane and satisfying and so deserved. But the swift backlash online toward him and Anora sort of diluted the victory. But I don't want to let this triumphant moment be eclipsed by the Mikey Madison versus Demi Moore debate, or the debate over whether or not Sean Baker screwed over his crew of Anora behind the scenes, or the debate over whether or not Sean Baker was wrong for the cost cutting and not hiring of an intimacy coordinator on set, or whether or not Anora deserved a win over The Substance or Dune Part 2, etc. While valid debates in their own right, they're moot and arbitrary to the art being referenced, and they seem like a part of a larger movement to stir up more negative opinions about Anora. And hey, if you want to rush to the comments to tell me how wrong I am for not addressing these points, that's fine, but there's plenty of other people on YouTube making that kind of content.
I don't give a fuck. Do I look like I give a fuck? Because I don't.
To me, Anora is a modern-day gutsy retelling of a Cinderella story that doesn't have a happy ending, which might explain why the response to it has been so mixed. Tangerine is a less glamorous, but more beautiful and raw portrayal of the human condition, but both films can tell us a lot about where we are in the world right now, and in a way, they feel like a mirror held up to its audience. In this video, I want to explore 3 key aspects of Tangerine and Anora: the portrayal of hustle culture and its connection to the American subcultural underbelly, the contrast between authentic and inauthentic representation in film and its impact on character dynamics, and finally, how both films were received and what they reveal about the evolving portrayal of marginalized communities in cinema. Set on Christmas Eve in the gritty underbelly of Los Angeles, Tangerine follows a fiery, fast-talking trans sex worker named Cindy as she tears through the streets on a quest for revenge against her cheating pimp and boyfriend, dragging her best friend Alexandra along for the ride. Famously shot on 3 separate iPhone 5Ss with a budget of around $100,000, Tangerine is a raw, electric journey through love, betrayal, and survival at the fringes of the American dream. Tangerine's focus relies on its intense but rich characters that encapsulate their environment perfectly because they fit in with the energy of a city that never stops hustling. Compared to Anora, Tangerine's depiction of the American underbelly is through the POV of what many people would consider the overlooked and lowest among society. Cindy and Alexandra don't have the same living standards as Anora. For Cindy and Alexandra, they have to relentlessly grind, where their livelihood is dictated by their struggle. Cindy and Alexandra have no safety net. They have each other. We see both women struggle to get money for sex work as they deal with sketchy, possibly dangerous men in order to make ends meet. The level of risk is significantly higher for these women to get hurt or killed in their line of work. This is unfortunately the sad reality for many trans women of color who are sex workers. The sex worker lifestyle reality depicted in Tangerine feels true to life, because it is. We feel the toughness of Los Angeles, while also feeling the feistiness and determination of our protagonists. Anora follows the story of Annie, aka Anora, a quick-witted and ambitious stripper in Brooklyn who thinks she's finally found her fairy tale ending when she falls for the sweet but douchey son of a Russian oligarch named Vanya. As their chaotic romance spirals into a high-stakes game against his rich and powerful parents, Anora must fight to hold on to her dreams, proving that love, like survival, is never without a cost. With Baker's highest film budget of around $6 million, Anora focuses equally on characters, but more so how they interact with one another and how their individual background plays into character dynamics. Anora, a stripper who has never known financial security, stands out in a world where wealth is seemingly taken for granted, making her the only one who truly understands the stakes of chasing it. Compared to Tangerine, Anora is a bit more of a glamorized American underbelly POV. Anora isn't in random cars doing sex favors for a few dollars. Anora is presented as a bit more high maintenance, used to a specific set of standards from her high-profile clientele. Where there is a sisterhood at the core of Tangerine, Anora is alone. There are many women at her strip club, but there are no sisterly bonds. Anora is a sex worker, yes, but she operates within the relative safety of a high-end strip club, surrounded by security, and catering to wealthy, powerful men. As a white woman in this environment, she exists on the fringes of society, yet her story isn't shaped by the same economic and sociocultural struggles that define the women in Tangerine, whose work carries far greater risks. While Anora may reflect the reality for some young, white, and conventionally attractive sex workers, it presents a version of sex work that feels more polished than raw. In Anora, sex work is a subplot, one piece of a larger narrative, whereas in Tangerine, it is the very heartbeat of the story. Both Tangerine and Anora serve as reflections of different facets of America, its contradictions, its struggles, and the often overlooked people who define it. Tangerine stars primarily non-actors, with Kitana Kiki Rodriguez playing the role of Cindy and Maya Taylor playing the role of Alexandra. Both women bring an authenticity and a level of honesty to their roles that helps to connect with the audience in a more meaningful way than that of Anora. Kitana Kiki Rodriguez had never acted before Tangerine. In real life, she was roommates with her eventual co-star Maya Taylor. Maya had first-hand experience as a sex worker at 18 after being abandoned by multiple family members due to her gender identity. At 18, Maya struggled to find stable work, having been homeless multiple times as a minor. Before being cast in Tangerine at age 23, she had been arrested 4 times in Los Angeles for sex work. Knowing this adds a deeper layer of authenticity to her performance. She wasn't just playing a character, she had lived many of the same struggles firsthand, and her pain could be felt through her performance. Tangerine embodies the guerrilla style of filmmaking, where you use only a few takes of a scene, oftentimes only one take, and the film focuses on storyline rather than empty visual eye candy. Titled after the LA sky at sunset, Tangerine is visually beautiful and includes several breathtaking shots, but they aren't the primary focus. They take a back seat to the characters. What the city of Los Angeles does help do is reinforce the gritty and grimy hustle culture that both Cindy and Alexandra are both embedded in. It reinforces the sisterhood bond the women have against the men in their world. The role of men in Tangerine includes mainly that of Chester, who is Cindy's boyfriend and pimp. In Tangerine, Chester is the classic example of the deceitful men that they encounter in their world. However, in reality, Chester holds very little real power over any of the women by the film's conclusion. Cindy and Alexandra refuse to be viewed as weak. They're not weak. The women are independent participants in a hustle culture controlled by the men, but that control the men have over them is never enough to strike fear in their determination. Men in Tangerine only hold as much power as the women allow them to have. Cindy's relentless determination to seek revenge on Chester for cheating paints a clear picture that she is in fact in control and refuses to be exploited any further. Anora stars Mikey Madison as Anora, who has been in less than 10 films in her entire career, but is still considered in line with the stereotypically classic Hollywood actress. Mikey Madison has never been a sex worker or a stripper as far as public knowledge goes, although to prepare for Anora, Mikey did learn a bit of Russian, and she spent several months taking pole dancing classes to help look more authentic during the stripping scenes in her film. Mikey also worked very closely with sex worker consultants and strippers in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn, in order to understand her character Annie more. So while the women of Tangerine have lived their characters' respective lives in many ways, Mikey had to create experiences for herself in order to get into character. Mikey grew up in Los Angeles, and she most recently appeared in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood in 2019. While it doesn't feature any major A-list actors, Anora boasts a more refined and polished filmmaking style than Tangerine, with a sharper visual aesthetic and a more controlled, deliberate approach to storytelling. Anora's editing feels more mapped out and pre-planned compared to Tangerine, where many of the shots feel very point and shoot and the editing is more chaotic. Anora's cinematography is more picturesque, with enhanced visual dramatic cues and pauses. Throughout Anora, we witness the gradual loss of Anora's independence as the men around her tighten their grip, leaving her nearly powerless by the film's end. Anora placed too much trust in their hands, and as is all too familiar in her line of work, they ultimately found ways to exploit and diminish her. By the time Anora reaches its conclusion, Anora is entirely reliant on the men in her life, first on Vanya, whose affection comes with financial dependence, and later on the hope of a divorce settlement as compensation for everything she has gone through. At first, Anora seemed to have the advantage against the privileged and douchey Russian heir, only to end up being a pawn in a world completely controlled by other people, including him. Anora seems in control, but she never actually is. It's a facade. Tangerine became a critical indie hit after premiering at the 2015 Sundance Film Festival, earning widespread praise for both Kitana Kiki Rodriguez and Maya Taylor's performances. While several critics organizations nominated Maya for Best Supporting Actress, she most notably won the Film Independent Spirit Award and the Gotham Award in that category. A few critics floated the idea of Maya Taylor becoming the first trans actress to be nominated for an Academy Award, but Tangerine had a very small budget, had virtually no marketing or awards campaign budget, and so the indie breakout success of the film was viewed as the win for most of the cast and crew. After Tangerine, Maya Taylor took on a few smaller projects, though none reached the same level of emotional depth or indie success. Kitana Kiki Rodriguez, who prefers to stay out of the spotlight, has no further acting credits after Tangerine. Today, Maya works as an ER nurse in a North Dakota hospital while continuing to audition for film roles regularly. Tangerine earned Sean Baker recognition from various critic circles, but his real success lay in the devoted fanbase that Tangerine helped build for him, people who fell in love with his unique style of storytelling. Tangerine wasn't a box office smash, nor was it winning over the so-called film bros, who dismiss anything without an A-list cast and blockbuster-level explosive visual effects. But Tangerine accomplished something very few films dare to do. It spotlighted society's so-called outcasts with honesty and without judgment, fear, or restraint, stripping away Hollywood's usual gloss to deliver a story that feels raw, real, and unapologetically human. Anora became the indie darling of the 2025 Academy Awards. After winning the highest honor, the Palme d'Or, at the 2024 Cannes Film Festival, it immediately positioned itself as an Oscar frontrunner, a status it maintained throughout the season. Anora was a beautifully crafted art house film, but it wasn't Oppenheimer. It wasn't dominating every award show. In fact, it lost more awards than it won throughout the season. Who would have known that the Oscars would love Anora so much that they would give it 5 wins out of 6 nominations? Mikey Madison's limited filmography makes it difficult to predict how her Oscar win will age, given that she's only 25 years old. With so few leading film roles to her name, the controversy surrounding her victory stems largely from her relative newcomer status. Sean Baker deserved every award he won, though the only real surprise of the night was his victory in Best Editing. And while it would have been great to see The Substance take home Best Original Screenplay or Director, I understand why the Academy went with Sean. As far as how Anora will age, I worry that the backlash may overshadow its legacy, shaping its perception in ways it doesn't deserve. Much of that will depend on what Sean Baker and Mikey Madison ultimately do, and whether time softens the initial negativity. Beyond its Oscar legacy, I believe Anora will endure as an indie success, one that champions sex work from the sidelines, while finding ways to make its portrayal of marginalized communities more palatable to mainstream audiences. Before wrapping up this video, I feel compelled to quickly address the Mikey Madison versus Demi Moore debate. So, in 30 seconds, here are my hot takes on why she took home the Oscar. Mikey Madison winning the Oscar for Best Actress for Anora comes down to one simple fact. She was Anora. Mikey is an 80% of Anora, and she was the only nominee whose film was written specifically by her director to showcase her strengths, making her victory almost inevitable. Demi Moore lost Best Actress because she was a co-lead with Margaret Qualley, and in many ways her career resurgence was its own reward. The best performance was Fernanda Torres, but the Academy simply didn't watch I'm Still Here, and if they did, honoring it with Best International Feature was their way of sidestepping the need to recognize Fernanda herself, which is exactly what happened. With history on the horizon, Anora will surely be solidified as an underdog Best Picture winner, similar to Midnight Cowboy or Moonlight, the little indie that could, as many have referred to it as. But what I wish for Anora is to be remembered by the legacy it has created in the shadow of films like Tangerine. Independent films have always walked so that others could run. Independent films constantly pave the way for future projects to be considered groundbreaking, whereas they merely were able to finally capture a cultural zeitgeist that many projects before them had laid the foundation for. Films that are often overlooked in their time, only for history to reveal the depth of their impact. We wouldn't have films like Brokeback Mountain, Love, Simon, or Call Me By Your Name without films like Paris is Burning, The Crying Game, My Beautiful Laundrette, and Boys Don't Cry. These films weren't just stepping stones. They were battle cries, love letters, and lifelines for those who saw themselves in stories that the world just wasn't always ready to embrace. While it's important to applaud and appreciate Anora's landslide victory, it is equally if not more important to educate and reinvigorate interest in the groundbreaking piece of cinema that paved the way for it to succeed. Tangerine may have found its place as a cult classic and an indie gem, but at its core, it should ultimately be remembered as the film that encapsulated its time better than most could, albeit unconventionally. If Tangerine proved anything, it's that sometimes the most beautifully true-to-life stories are the ones that don't come from celebrities and don't require $100 million budgets. In fact, sometimes the greatest stories may even come from the phone that you are holding in your hand right now.